G'day, Bomber fans. Apologies for the late upload. I thought I'd spend my Sunday crying after that loss. But no, I was just a bit busy. I trekked out to Dandenong to watch the Talent League. I met with Scooter McNeese, which was lovely. Didn't get time to record a video, but I think that's for the best. I had, quite a few thoughts after the game. None of them pleasant. And after sitting on this game for a day or two, I think I'm in a good spot to talk about it. But yeah, horrible loss. The Bombers were taught a brutal lesson by the Bulldogs. It was men against, not even boys, I'd say men against toddlers. If you're living under a rock or chose to forget about the events that occurred on Saturday night, here's your reminder video. The Bombers got smashed by 91 points. So let's talk about what the bloody hell happened. Quarter by quarter recap. You know what? I feel like we got off to a not horrible start. Low bar, but it was, it was a bit of an arm wrestle early. Behinds were being traded. It was actually the Dogs who took over 10 minutes to hit the scoreboard through Bontempelli. But from there, I don't know, the switch was flicked. They piled on goal after goal, deflating goals too. It was 2-2 after about 10 minutes, but by the end of the quarter, it was 45-3. It was raining outside Marvel and raining goals inside. We needed a response in the second to stay in the game, and we didn't get one. The Dogs piled on more goals. I think it was 9 in a row until we kicked our first from a lovely Xavier Dersma mark. But by the time we got that goal, the game was done. At halftime, we had scored 1 goal. The Dogs had scored 10 and probably should have had more. The third, honestly, guys, I don't remember much of it. I feel like we kicked a few goals. I think there was a Sam Durham and maybe an Archie Perkins goal, but couldn't tell you what else happened in this quarter. Yeah, the Dogs kicked 5. They led by 75 points at the premiership quarter break. And the last quarter, I mean, by this stage, I was kind of just watching the Dogs and admiring how well they were playing. I could not tell you anything we did in that final term. I think I'd come to terms with the loss by now, by this stage, and I was not happy. I was content, and I was more invested in Bailey Dale hitting that disposals record, which he did, by the way. Dale ended the night with more disposals than we had points as a team. Let that sink in for a second. All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty. Yeah, not great. It was probably great if you're a Bulldogs fan. And let's start by talking about our opponents, actually, because yeah, we were bad. We know that. But to start, those Dogs, they're in good form right now. Much has been made about our record against good and bad teams, the difference in quality when we play top sides. But, I mean, have we played a team that good so far this year? And I'm not saying they're the flag favourites or something. I'd probably still back in the Pies, but that is probably the best side that we've played on game day so far. And we've played good teams. We've played the Pies. But I genuinely saw nothing at all to note in this game, or no area that had, we had going our way. Whereas in the other games, Pies, the Hawks, even the Crows, in those games, there were probably aspects that we could be happy with. I thought the Dogs were just clinical, they were clean, they were tougher than us, they were just so much better. I don't even think it was a lack of effort from us. I think we tried, but we just were not good enough, or not even close to good enough to match it with the Dogs. That game was as big a reality check and a massive sign as to where we are as a club. The Dogs are one of the best teams in the league, and we're sitting around the bottom 8, the bottom 6. And the thing I love about the Dogs, right, is they prey on teams like us. I don't think we're a bottom 4 team. We're not going to end the year in the bottom 4, I don't think. But yeah, they just know how to beat mid to average, poor sides of footy and beat them well. So credit to the Dogs. They're very good, and they deserve some credit before we start harping on about our boys. Okay, now us, yeah, I said that the effort was there, and I thought it was. I don't think we were completely out of it mentally, or not, we were out of it mentally, but we were trying to remain competitive. I felt that the effort, although it could have, been higher, it was there, but I just think this was a case of a great team at their best against an average or bad team at their worst. We were really sloppy. It was embarrassing. Our skills were arguably the worst they've been all year. And a big part of that is the pressure that the Dogs applied. I feel like they were making it really hard for us to have any space and any time with the ball. I reckon most of our disposals were, rushed backwards hand passes to players under more pressure, or hack kicks that were forced onto us by great forward pressure. And the other disposals that we had were unforced errors that we usually just do not make. Whereas the Dogs, they just had that raw strength and skill to break a tackle and find space. I look at Riley West and Archie Roberts as a great example of where these teams are at. That was a young boy in his 15th game, something probably less, going up against Riley West, who's had 7 or so years in the system. No one's worried about Roberts. We think he's going to be a great player, but unfortunately, he just got owned a bit in a few instances. And that's not me, dissing Roberts. I thought he was one of our better players. But unfortunately, there were just, too many instances of older Dogs players decking our juniors. But also, the seniors. Where was Langford? Where was Caldwell? Where was Merritt? The difference in this game was the fact that the Dogs had leaders everywhere standing up. Well, that's not really the main difference, but it was embarrassing to see our leaders and our senior players just go missing and the juniors had to kind of not pick up the pieces because they didn't, but watch it all unfold. It was pretty unfair for our young boys playing out there to see everyone drop their heads pretty much. Let's look at some stats that really paint the picture as to how the game played out. So the Dogs, they knew that if they possessed the ball or over-possessed the ball, we would really struggle to do anything because we usually do the same. They had 469 disposals. That's a lot. We had 385, so they almost had 100 more. 61 inside 50s to 37. 60% of the game was played in the Dogs' forward half. We had so much less of the ball, but still managed more turnovers. And that isn't because the Dogs were hogging it. They were going pretty hard directly through the corridor. And with those turnovers, did serious damage. They actually scored 12 goals, 10 from turnover. That's 22 scoring shots from turnover alone. That is nuts. The Dogs did win by 91, but they scored 18 goals, 19. Probably could have done it by more. But also, 40 shots to 16, not scoring shots, but shots. So we kicked 5 goals and 6 behinds, and I guess 5 that didn't register a score at all. The expected score from shot placements is actually around the same margin as the game. So that's interesting. Maybe on paper the result is actually fairer than it seems. We keep going though. The Dogs had 24 less hitouts, but 8 more clearances. 341 uncontested possessions for them. They average 100 less than that a game. They gained 6,200 metres. That's a lot. We gained under 5,000. That's a huge differential. 21 marks inside 50. 16 tackles inside 50 to 5. The only thing we really won was the free kick count. So thank you, umpires. And Bailey Dale, yeah. I'll talk about him specifically because there were more, but Bailey Dale is someone that we were talking about. I feel everyone was talking about Bailey Dale before the game and how important he'd be. We tried to stem his influence. Everything just failed. I was watching him run circles around Hobbs and then Perkins and every forward. We tried everything we could and nothing worked. There were only a couple of matchups off the top of my head that we won. I thought Mackay beat Norton and Goldie probably stopped English in hitouts. Everything else, I think the Bulldogs had the upper hand. Yeah, every way you look at it, it was bad. Bad is an understatement. It was pretty horrific. It was really brutal to watch. But honestly, I was having a think right after, and because I thought about what I was going to say if I recorded straight after the game, and it was not going to be good. But after a day, I think about games in the past. 2019 against the Dogs springs to mind, where they kicked, I think, 23 goals in a row. 2023 against the Giants when they killed us by 100. Even 2024 against the Saints. But I think the main difference in those games for me is where we were at as a club then. In 2019, in those years, we were pushing for finals, getting railed by teams we should be contending with. And here, obviously 91 points is horrible. That is never good for any team. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can be last on the ladder and you would obviously still be disappointed by 91 point loss. But this sort of stuff just does happen to rebuilding clubs. And I think people need to realise that a bit more. This is something, we need to start thinking about before we start calling for heads and whatnot. This is part of the footy cycle, and I know it's frustrating, but this was always going to happen. And not this specific match, not this bad, but games like this were always going to occur this year. Look at Hawthorn in 2023 and even 2024. I remember watching the Hawks versus Suns game early in the year last year with Hawthorn mates, and they turned the TV off at half-time. Fast forward a few months, and they're a kick-off a prelim final. And look at Collingwood in 2021. They were bottom 4. 2 years later, they win a flag. The best one is Richmond 2016, when they lost by over 100 points against the Swans, and I then went on to win a flag the next year. Was that 20? Or maybe that was 2015. Either way, I get that these games really do suck, and I agree. I hate watching my team get smashed. This wasn't fun, and it's not acceptable. But this isn't an indication that we're not on the right track. I actually still feel okay about where the club is heading. Well, I still feel good about where the club's going, despite this. And that wasn't the case after the Giants loss in 2023 or the Bulldogs loss in 2019. I felt hopeless after those games. But after this, I think what we saw on Saturday was a great team at their very best, going up against a developing, young, injury-hit team at their very, very worst. And of course, the differential between these teams, with that taken into account, is going to be absolutely massive if we're not at our best and they're at their best. Should we be losing by 91 points to this team or to any team? No, we shouldn't. okay? But we did. And so did other teams before they went on to be finished product side. The fact for me, we're not a finished product side. We're not even close. We're building towards being finished product, but we're not going to be, you know, until probably another year or 2 or 3. And until we are, there are going to be games where us being off the mark just isn't good enough, and it can result in you know, things like this. I mean, look at our individuals. We had Dale running rampant, and no one on our list could stop him. We tried, but we just didn't have that player in our team yet. I'm sure eventually we will, but for this game we did not. And even our young guns that we've been talking about all year, Caddy, Roberts, Kako, I have no doubts that they're going to be awesome players for us in 3 years. They're our future. But they were, you know, or apart from Roberts, they were not really having a say on the game at all. They're not awesome players right now, and that's not controversial. They're young. Of course, they're not awesome. They're not going to be finished product players at the age of 19. They still need time, and so does the team. And those are the guys who are building this team around. Same with Reed. We're still adding to our list, and at the end of the year, culling it as well. At our best, we can contend with good teams. I think we've shown that. But we're not in a spot to be able to do that, you know, to stop a brutal loss when we're not at our best. You know, Geelong are a team that do that really well. They never seem to be out of matches. When they're not at their best, they're still not losing by much. But that's because they're a finished product side, and we're not. You know, look at every young team in every season of AFL footy. I will bet you cash money that they all have games like this. It is unfortunately just a natural part of progression. Yes, it is a horrible loss, and I hated it, but it is not the disaster that many are, you know, making it out to be. We don't need to sack Scott. We don't need to cull half the list. It's funny how everyone overreacts just because of a bit of media hype. But yeah, even if I'm still on board with what the club is doing, because I think we are still doing the right thing. You know, we're playing the kids. We're playing to develop during games instead of protecting the scoreboard. Because, you know, I do appreciate that. We could have parked the bus and lost by 50 or 60. Instead, we kept trying new things, new structures, new players in the midfield, and it probably cost us more goals. But yeah, even though I appreciate that and I like what we've done this year, I don't want to see another game like that again. I would, and that goes without saying. But yeah, that for me has to be our worst loss of the year. And if there is worse than that, well, yeah, we could be in for a very long end of the season. And maybe we are, you know. Think about how young we are and how many injuries. This is probably where we should be playing a bit better than how we finished the year. So yeah, that was, it really was boys against men. And I worry about what happens when we play the Cats or even the Suns away from home. You know, those games could be just as brutal, if not more brutal than this. But now, you know, I guess the goal for me isn't about wins and losses. I said at the start of the year too, it isn't about wins and losses. But if we keep performing like this, then yeah, I'll be really, really worried. The thing is, though, I don't think we will. I think there'll be moments and quarters where we're just miles off it. That always happens. You know, it would be silly to think otherwise. We're not going to be a great side in 2025, but we just have to reduce the amount of times we see this. You know, like seriously reduce it. So, what are we? Round 10, 6 wins, 5 losses, 2 really bad blowouts. Make of that what you will, I guess. And I think now what people have to do, rather than harp on about the game and how crap it was, is I think we just got to look forward and look at what we can do from now. And we got a game against the Tigers coming up. I really hope we see some change. I'd hate to, you know, see the same team go into this match. But then again, you know, the lack of VFL footy, some will want to see Zach Johnson, I agree. He hasn't played footy in 3 weeks because we had that VFL bye. That is the really frustrating thing about this whole situation. This could be a great time to play Johnson and Clark, but they haven't played in a little while. And it's just annoying. You know, we could swing the axe, blood another debutant or two, but instead we probably won't because the bloody VFL AFL system has made it so we have to have the bye and they're rested. So yeah, we'll see. Even after that though, I hope we come out with real effort and intent against not just Richmond but Brisbane the week after too. I think next week against this week now against the Tigers is just a must-win game. I wouldn't say that much this year. I don't think games are must-win in a season like this, but this one is. I think we have to win this for morale. You know, the Tigers at the G in front of a big crowd after a big loss like that. I think we just have to win next week. And if we don't, I will be probably more mad than I am about this game. That is, you know, if we lose against the Tigers, I think you'll see a pretty angry Felix review. But yeah, let's get on to the votes. All right, well, I don't really think many players deserve votes. I'm going to give one to Nick Martin. I thought he was pretty average by his standards, but luckily for him, so was everyone else. He had some good moments. That courageous mark was probably the best of the night for me. The next two I thought were actually okay. I thought Ben Mackay, 2 votes. You know, Norden wasn't a factor. Mackay had a game-high 9 intercepts while being involved in 7 one-on-ones and losing just the one of them. That's a crazy amount. I thought he was alright. I thought he was one of our best. And 3 votes to Xavier Dersma. Yeah, I thought he was okay too. I think those two can hold their head up. When I left, I thought that Dersma and Mackay were the ones up to pace. And the role player, he wasn't great around the ground, but I liked Goldie's work in the ruck. But yeah, that is that. No one really deserves votes, but they get them. Leave your votes in down below if you can find any. Bad game, annoying review. On to the next match. I think we just got to stay positive until they really let us down this week. I don't know why. I think that even just a 1-point loss to the Tigers this week would send me into a worse spot than I was in against the Bulldogs. And maybe it's because the Bulldogs played such good footy. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Big week coming up. Interesting week coming up. Yeah, cheers for watching. And cheers for sticking around, by the way, fans, at the game. That was the atmosphere, despite it being such a blowout, was genuinely decent. Everyone was still pretty loud when there was a goal. The chants were still going, so well done to the cheer squad. So, yeah, heads up, fans. Cheers for watching. Like, subscribe, and go Bombers.